The next item then is review and consideration for approval of the recommendations from our Teacher Compensation Committee. There were a number of documents embedded. Mrs. Zardi can sort of speak to the nature of that.
Sure. The committee, if you recall, was appointed by the board back in November. I think our first meeting was actually held in December. So we've held 6 meetings during this school year. And I had listed in the summary for you just the different topics that we had talked about at those meetings. The short-term goals that the committee is working on is reviewing Schedule B and making recommendations to changes there. And also the idea of how to create more supplemental pay opportunities to increase our capacity, again, to expand teacher leadership so that we can see improved academic performance. Again, what gets monitored tends to make improvements. So we, with the new educator effectiveness and again with our test scores, we know we've got to be keeping an eye on what's happening in buildings and in classrooms and promoting the things that we believe will help improve that performance. Long-term, creating that new salary schedule. And we know that that's a slow process. It's not something that we anticipate getting done even, I don't believe, next year. I think you're going to be seeing us making small, steady changes. Superintendent's meeting that I was at last week, we discussed even the possibility of perhaps having more of a regional or a CSA salary type of schedule. So we're talking from that perspective. Our individual committee is meeting, other districts are having meetings. No one's real anxious to move too quickly on this. And part of it is being, ensuring that whatever is created we know we can sustain and that we can afford. However, there were some changes that the committee, recommendations that the committee is making to the board, and tonight's just the first review of that, and I certainly would ask that you wait until the earliest, to the June 3rd meeting, the board retreat, where we could put this on the agenda again and answer any questions that you may have. But one of the proposals is the elimination of the paperwork and the concept of bank time. We have in our school calendar exceeded the hours and minutes of instruction that are required by the state. And that's why we are able to have 3 free snow days every year, because our hours are greater than what is required. We know that our teachers put in many more hours than the regular school day, whether they're involved in committees, helping out with different school activities that are taking place, grading papers, all of that type of thing. So from our discussion, we felt that just eliminating the need to be documenting the hours that you put in above and beyond could be done. We could eliminate that paperwork, and then we're really treating teachers in a more professional manner. We're showing them that we are confident that they can serve students in a professional manner and that they are doing what's needed to get the job done. Second recommendation is that in our teacher handbook, or our employee handbook, we attach the document that is included here. That is the new teacher compensation that we currently have. And instead of having the old salary schedule that has lanes where you're moving across if you get credits and you're moving down for every year of experience, that this be placed in the employee handbook instead, where we state what the starting pay is, what our maximum pay is, how changes in salary is dependent on negotiations with the board and the TEA, and it's related to the CPI in terms of a base wage salary increase. Supplemental pay is really our Schedule B, that we have a competitive benefits package, and that new employees coming in will be placed somewhere between that 34,162 and 6726 based on their experience and their education. So we would actually hang on to the old salary schedule that we have to assist us in placing people, but that is not part of the handbook because it really creates kind of a false promise of what exists. Because as long as we have that lanes and steps, in teachers' heads, they're still thinking, well, maybe if I get 6 more credits, I can move to the next lane and get paid more. And we're not doing that. Or maybe if my next year of experience gives me additional pay. It doesn't currently, because we're only using the CPI, the base wage increase that's negotiated with the board and the TEA. And then, of course, any supplemental pay. So a second recommendation is to use this to replace the traditional salary schedule that we've had. The next recommendation is to eliminate this form. This is a course approval form that teachers always had to have signed. I've got it the wrong way, but you can. And in order to receive credit for your classes and to make lane advancements, this had to be approved before you enrolled in the classes. Again, teachers don't really need our approval to take a class right now because we're not providing them with any additional compensation. So the feeling was, instead of having a course approval form, we do have a course notification form, because we do want to know the kinds of things that our teachers are enrolling in and what they're doing, and we'd like to keep track of that. They'll want to keep track of it as for the educator effectiveness plan that they'll be developing, but it's just good for us to know the courses and the programs that teachers are involved in. So this is just replaces that approval form with a notification form. And then lastly, and I should run back, one of the difficulties with this approval form, again, is that we check on here approved for horizontal movement on the salary schedule. So for 2 years now, I've been crossing that off and saying there is no horizontal movement. We haven't been doing that. So it's just cleaner to have a different form, obviously. And then lastly, a lot of the discussion on the committee has been in relationship to if a teacher earns a master's degree or a graduate program degree, will there be supplemental pay provided to them for earning that degree? And I think there was consensus among committee members that we're comfortable with providing supplemental pay, provided that the district believes that the program merits receiving supplemental pay, so that the course of education that the teacher is taking is something that's going to benefit them as a classroom teacher. It's going to improve student achievement. It benefits our district. So in that discussion, part of what was talked about was we have 2 groups of staff members right now. We have some teachers who have been working on a master's degree. Where do they stand in regard to that? And then we have employees who have never begun any coursework on that. And so we talked about how teachers who currently have started a master's program that maybe are at bachelor's in 18, that we allow them to make a jump to the master's lane that exists in that old salary schedule. But new people coming in, we'd be looking at implementing a supplemental pay amount that is added on to their base wage salary, and that it would be the board that would determine obviously what that amount would be for supplemental pay. And then going along with that is the idea that for the district to control what the master's or graduate program is that our staff members enroll in, that they actually would have to receive approval for that program again. And we would set up a committee meeting to evaluate the merit of the degree. On that committee would be myself and 2 administrators, a building administrator, the person who's wants to work on the degree, and then a second building level administrator who maybe can serve as, fielding more questions and just, I guess, creating more of a balance so that it's not just a given. We're really examining what people are doing. We talked about how the applicant needs to prepare a statement of intent to share at the committee meeting, provide documentation from the university on the conceptual framework or the performance outcomes that will result from their successful completion of the program. So basically they are making a case for why and how this program will improve their professional practice, student achievement, or, as I mentioned earlier, benefit the district. And then the committee can make a determination on the merit of the program and either approve or deny approval for supplemental pay. So then we have the master's graduate degree program approval form that would include who was on the committee, when the interview was held, the decision made by the committee members, and appropriate signature. So these are the recommendations that are coming to the board at this time in regard to teacher compensation. I think the committee felt pretty good. I know they wanted to try to accomplish some things this year. We've had a lot of discussions on where we're going to go, a lot of very open-ended discussions without reaching a lot of consensus on things. So having a few recommendations that they can bring to you, I know is important, so that they felt like they could say something was accomplished during those meetings. I know the concern has been raised about even the supplemental pay. How is that something that is affordable by our district? Currently we have, I believe, of the 243 staff members, there's a little over 100 of them who already have master's degrees. So you have 100 people that potentially could be looking at earning a master's degree, wishing to obtain supplemental pay. We have to do some costing, figuring out if that's even, or how feasible that is. And that information needs to be given to you, obviously, before you could approve any amount of supplemental pay for this particular plan. So that's something that still needs to be considered.
Yeah, there were a lot of angles to it, and certainly if you were in on the committee, this makes sense. If I was looking at this for the first time, it may be, I don't know, a little overwhelming. You said there were 100 some teachers already with masters?
Yes.
But they would already, they'd already be compensated. I mean, they've already been moved to...
That's right.
So we don't have to worry about
Correct.
them in terms of finding additional
right.
supplemental pay funding. It's people working on a master's. I mean, there was broad consensus in the committee. We liked this. We want teachers to continue working towards improving their knowledge and skills, but having it be relevant to things that we think are important. But
and there are changes that have taken place again in teacher licensing. So 10 years ago, you had to take graduate credits in order to have your license renewed. Today, that's not the case. With the PI 34, the Professional Educator program through DPI, teachers really just need to develop a professional education plan. It doesn't require them to take courses, so they can write out a plan. They can be working on improving their skills as an educator without having to earn credits. 10 years ago, people were earning credits, so it made sense. I'm taking these credits, it might as well go for something. So many of those teachers earned a master's degree. So I don't know how the younger staff coming in, I think there's going to be many of them that will say, I want to continue my education because they value that. But there are also many that may say, I'm okay with not necessarily getting a master's degree because by writing this professional development plan, I'm still able to obtain my licensure.
And the teachers really want this decided. I mean, they want to know. What would you propose we do? Think about, given everything, given all this information, look at it, think about what questions or concerns, take a closer look at the funding aspect and bring it back next month? This is something that does need to be decided before next year, doesn't it?
I think if you asked our teaching staff, they would like to have an answer on how does the board feel on the master's degree programs or getting a master's degree. Because there are people that are interested in starting a program. I do think there are portions of this that can be approved next month or at the next meeting, like the decision on bank time, the decision on what we put in the employee handbook for the teacher compensation, the notification form. I think the big question, though, that we may not be able to answer as quickly as the supplemental pay for a master's degree. So that's something I'll have to put Greg on to next week to start looking at.
I guess I would think we could maybe have some time to look at this and at the June 3rd meeting, maybe break out some of those easier ones that we could vote on and separate out the master's program, unless you have some costs, but I think that's going to take us a little bit longer.
As we talked a little bit about this, this isn't easy. This isn't something that you're going to do that's not going to affect something else. Everybody will agree it's a good plan, but the bottom line is, if it's tied to dollars, you're going to have to make some decisions. So whatever you do, you need to be, I guess, as anything that we've talked about when it comes to finances, you better be prepared to decide if this is where your focus is, then something else isn't going to happen right now. Because unless something changes in that budget, which we know we're going to see an increase, but we don't know what that is, but we still have problems. You still have problems in 14-15, okay, that we have to deal with. It makes it very difficult to make these decisions about what you want to do going forward. There are some options, but if you just said you just want to add this, that would be very difficult to do without something else going. And I don't know if I'm overstating it or understating it.
It was brought up
Yeah.
at the committee meeting too, that in the next year, we're looking at serious financial issues, so.
And I don't like to say that all the time, but it's a reality of it, and you need to. And I think, Cindy, when you met and we talked, and you met with those other superintendents, they're recognizing that too. That whatever you do, and if you're going to commit to a master's, which it makes perfect sense, but you better be looking at what that's going to do 5-10 years down the road, not what it's just going to do this year.
And I think that, it's a balancing act. We know student achievement has to be our key focus, and putting money into safety and student achievement, and yet we know that, hiring the best teachers and keeping them here is critical for student achievement also. Because it is that classroom teacher that's going to make the difference. And we don't want our best people leaving to go to other districts because we don't acknowledge their worth in what they receive for compensation. So when you look at the strategic plan, that was a key piece of it as well, that attracting, hiring, and retaining quality teachers. That came out loud and clear from our community. How we balance all of that, we all work together to figure that out.
Well, it's going to be a tough decision for you because to make that balance, I don't...
And it may be that we have to wait. You know, we say this is the plan that we're looking at implementing in the future, but at this point in time, because of the financial implications and the situation that the state is in, until there's a change, we can't implement it. And I don't know if that would do more harm than good, but...
It's better to wait and make, and this is just my opinion, it's better to wait and make a step in the right direction than making a step in a direction and going back 2 steps.
No, I appreciate all of this. I just want it discussed fully, and you're right. It's a tough situation because we say all these things. I take Ms. Barish to task. Not her to task. I'm responsible role. We want to improve these test scores, and we want to hire. We say we want to hire the best, and so we try to implement things to do that. But we also have the financial limitations, and we don't want to make promises that we can't keep. So, I know we're sort of going in circles, but I don't know how to get out of that circle. I don't know if it's a matter of getting more information on the number of people that are getting the masters, how much they're getting paid. Is that what finally helps us make the decision? I'm still struggling with figuring out how we'll ultimately make the decision on this. And I know we have to wait.
Not the only district struggling with it. I think we can take some
I was going to ask,
solace.
do we know what is working for any other districts? I mean, does any other district have a plan like this that you know of?
Some districts are still working under the union agreement until that expires this year, right?
This is
Some
such
districts.
a great incentive for the teachers to be better and work harder. And
Since Act 10, everything's all up in the air, and just figuring out how to rework everything with the employee handbook, and so that's why this is all.
And again, you have compounding issues here. It's not just the fact that it's Act 10, because certainly that has had a huge impact on this. There's no question. But other districts might be in a little bit better shape because instead of expending all that savings on continuing programs or maintaining programs that we had to because of our declining enrollment and the loss of students, because declining enrollment doesn't necessarily equate to smaller or less teachers. So, for us, that hasn't been able to help, or some of those savings could have been directed last year possibly at supplemental pay. They haven't been able to do that. They've just, that little Dutch boy sticking the finger in the boat and trying to keep it afloat, and that's about as close to poetic.
Well, and the other thing I think that needs to be mentioned is that from the discussions in that committee, there was recognition that this isn't all about money either, that we can recognize the work of our teachers and treat them as professionals and be doing things that make them feel, like they're more empowered to take control over things. So we talked about, again, that's where the issue of bank time comes in. I know they brought up, as we look at collaboration days, giving them some of the authority on how to be using that time, that they know what needs to get done in their content areas and in their classrooms, and providing them with a little bit more freedom in that way. So working on some of those things as well, so that teachers have that sense of, ownership. And I think you heard Ms. Sparish talk about that tonight, taking those teachers to that curriculum companion workshop, and we're going to be proposing that there be curriculum leader pay, so that we've created an avenue for some supplemental pay for teachers that are stepping up and running those meetings on collaboration days. Those are things that we can be doing that support and hopefully encourage teachers to want to stay in the district, because they feel like they're valued and respected for their opinions and their work. But traditionally, a master's has been one avenue for increased compensation. And the difficulty is, how do we afford that in these financial times? We may not be able to for a number of years here.
Okay. Anything else on that subject? Now we'll go